At last, a report from today that isn't about the Middle East. Feels good. Certainly feels good to me. Spain jails Catalan separatist leaders. Protesters take to the streets. Taking it to the streets. Ba-da-doo-doo. But no, this is from Reuters, and it says, Madrid, Barcelona. Spain's Supreme Court on Monday jailed 9 Catalan separatist leaders for between 9 and 13 years for their role in a failed independence bid, a decision that triggered protests in the region and left the future course of the dispute uncertain. Barcelona's international airport became the focal point of the protests as thousands railed at its entrance riot. Police charged at the crowd using batons to prevent the risk of a forced mass injury, a police spokesman said. The airport chaos saw 67 flights canceled and others delayed, while protesters in the separatist stronghold of Girona burned tires on the train tracks, shutting the high-speed connection between Barcelona and France. Regional railways and roads were blocked at several places in the northwestern region. Earlier, acting Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said the sentence signified the defeat of the independence movement, whose long-running campaign has caused Spain's most serious political crisis since the death of dictator Francisco Franco 4 decades ago. The strength of the protest could be the first indication of how the future looks for the independence struggle, which so far been largely peaceful, nor does the ruling answer the question of how to handle the separatism drive supported by nearly half of Catalonia's population. This sentence is an attack on democracy and the rights of all citizens, the president of Catalan Parliament, Roger Torrent, said. Today we are all convicted, not just 12 people. The case concerned an independence referendum that was held in October 2017, despite being ruled illegal by Spanish courts, and the subsequent short-lived declaration of independence by the regional parliament. The longest prison term, 13 years, was imposed on the Catalan government's former deputy leader, Oriol Junqueras. The court convicted him and 8 other leaders on charges of sedition and 4 of them of misuse of public funds. 3 other defendants were found guilty, one of disobedience, and not sentenced to prison. All defendants were acquitted of the graver charge, rebellion. What happened on October 1st in 2017 was not a demonstration or a massive act of citizen protest. The Madrid court said its ruling it was a tumultuous uprising encouraged by the accused among many others. Look, you want my opinion on the Catalan situation of Catalonia wanting to become independent from Spain? You want to know what I really think? Was it not long ago that the people who founded this nation did the same thing with Britain? As far as I'm concerned, it's the same thing. A colony is the property of is part of a greater country, and so is a province and or state. If you find rulership being ruled over by a greater body to be unreasonable, you don't like the way they do things, then I think you should be afforded the right to break away. If you're getting hit with, say, super high taxes, or you're suffering abuses under their regime, then you have the right to break away. And not just for any old reason, of course. It would only be reasonable if you were breaking away for something real. And perhaps the Catalans are indeed breaking away for something truly real. It may very well be. I'll continue to think about that for a while, and I'll give you my opinion. But if their movement is reasonable, then philosophically I have to support it, or I'm a hypocrite. You understand? That's how our nation was born. That is how it happened. Therefore, philosophically, we have to support rebels unless, we have to support rebels, or we're hypocrites. And that is not to say just any old rebellion. But if the rebellion against an authoritarian power is reasonable, if they're being taxed to death, or suffering under human rights abuses, or whatever else, in that regard, severe negative treatment, then they're in the right, and therefore philosophically we have to support them. The same goes for Taiwan and Formosa. Prime Minister Sanchez, a socialist who had taken a less rigid line with the separatist movement than his conservative predecessor, said it was time to open a new chapter, but he did not elaborate. Today's decision confirms the defeat of a movement that failed to gain internal support and international recognition, he said in a televised speech. Rise up! The jailed men sent out a message of defiance, urging people to take to the streets. The CDR grassroots movement said on social media, it's time to rise up against the authoritarian fascism of the Spanish state and its accomplices. It is time for the hashtag Revolta Popular, or Popular Revolt. In Barcelona, various main streets were blocked by protesters holding signs calling for freedom for political prisoners. A crowd chanted, "We'll do it again," a slogan used by separatist supporters who want to hold another referendum. No independence has ever been achieved peacefully, said Danny Seva, a 19, a social education student who walked out of the class in protests. If we stop fighting, they will win with non-ethical methods. The ruling is also likely to color a national election on November 10th, Spain's fourth in 4 years. The jailed separatists said via social media that they would carry on their fight. 9 years in prison won't end my optimism. Catalonia will be independent if we persist. Let us demonstrate without fear. Let us move forward, determinedly from non-violence to freedom, said Jordi Sanchez, former leader of the Catalan National Assembly grassroots movement, who was sentenced to 9 years in prison. Catalan Regional President Quim Torra, a separatist, called for an amnesty for all 12 leaders and said he would seek a meeting with King Felipe and Sanchez. He stopped short of repeating calls for civil disobedience. Sanchez rebuffed the demand and said the sentences must be carried out, although he also suggested dialogue. Some in Catalonia said they no longer believed in that. We had hoped for dialogue, but the state is not up for dialogue. The sentence is very unfair. It's a great shame and very poor democracy, civil servant Angels Ubal said. An opinion poll in July showed 48.3% of Catalans against secession and 44% in favor. The court also issued a European arrest warrant for Charles Puigdemont, who was regional leader during its independence bid. He now lives in self-imposed exile in Belgium. In July 2018, the Spanish court dropped a warrant after Germany refused to extradite him. Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, who seeks independence for her own country, was among the few foreign figures to condemn the census, saying that any political system that leads to such a dreadful outcome needs urgent change. Well, anyone who knows anything about Spain is very familiar with the fact that their government very frequently, they have a history with being a bit overly harsh. They often hit people with sentences that are indeed very, very unfair for much of the time. Are they indeed an authoritarian power? I definitely think so. So, I think it's reasonable that Catalonia wants to achieve independence. I think it's very reasonable in the face of an authoritarian power. And given how the Spanish authorities have been handling this rebellion, which in my opinion is extremely poorly, these people have not been treated with the appropriate sort of dignity that you would expect. Spain has been conducting itself in an absolutely miserable fashion. So as far as I'm concerned, Catalonia is in the right. And so were we. Anyway, peace!